on the second day of the World Interfaith Harmony Week to have Swami Tattwamayananda come from the Northern California Vedanta Society to give a talk on harmony of religions and Swami Vivekananda. I will not introduce him. I'm only here to introduce the introducer. So I'm here to introduce Swami Vivekananda, who has been coming to Stanford for 11 years now, I think, and has been leading a class on Vedanta every Sunday. And several of us have been attending, and we've learned a lot, and we're very grateful to him for coming. And any other students who are here or just in the area and are interested in learning more after this talk, you're very welcome to come. We're here every Sunday. And anyway, so Swami Vivekananda is also a monk from the Northern California Vedanta Society, and he teaches from the scriptures of the Vedas and also from the writings of Swami Vivekananda, and he's very patient with us, and we're all very grateful to him. So he'll do the introduction for Swami Tattwamayananda. So thank you for your attention.
So that was the introduction to the introducer, and I'm the introducer. So Swami Tattwamayananda, who will give the talk this evening, is the Swami in charge of our center, the Vedanta Society of Northern California in San Francisco. We have a temple in San Francisco and also a retreat in Marin County, north of the city, in Olima, and so he's in charge of all those facilities. At that retreat, people come for meditation. People of all religions come. So today is part of the what was declared apparently by the United Nations as Interfaith Harmony Week. And we're practicing that interfaith harmony at that retreat in Olima. People of all religions come to that place for meditation, for study, for each in his own way or her own way. There's a men's retreat house and a women's retreat house. Doing their own spiritual practices. We insist that they have spiritual practices that they do on their own, in their own way, and they're free to do that. And we've had a great deal of positive feedback from that. People are very happy to have the opportunity to do that. So we're practicing what this Interfaith Harmony Week is supposed to be all about, at least to that extent. Now, tonight, I'm introducing Swami Tattwamayananda. He is a traditional Sanskrit scholar, Sanskrit and scriptural scholar in a very traditional way, but he's very unusual in this respect that although this is what he has done since he was just a child, they start at the age of 5 training children that way. And it's a very traditional training that goes back thousands of years. But at the same time, he has had a very modern and inclusive education in modern history, in European history and philosophy, and in all the branches of modern philosophical and spiritual knowledge. So he's very well versed in all these disciplines. And that is why it is a pleasure to introduce him on this subject. The title is the Spiritual Harmony which is an ancient tradition of Vedanta, of Hinduism, and Swami Vivekananda is a modern exponent of that ancient tradition. And in the flyer that illustrated this lecture, there's also a sketch of Shankaracharya, who is the great exponent of Vedanta that really revitalized Hinduism in the 9th century. So the Vedanta covers a whole spectrum of time and space and philosophy. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the Swami Tattwamayananda.
I'm very grateful to Swami Vivekananda ji for those kind words of introduction, and also to Mr. Peter and all his dedicated colleagues who arranged this wonderful program here. Giving me a chance to come to this august education institution. Now the subject, as already announced, is the ideal of interfaith harmony. In the context of Swami Vivekananda's exposition of ancient Vedantic wisdom. So, if you read Swami Vivekananda's the first talk that he gave on September 11th, 1893, during the Parliament of Religion, which was held as part of 400th anniversary of Columbus' discovery of the United States. Columbian Exposition is called. There are two very famous points that Swamiji makes. One, there is no such thing as a wrong religion. Second, the creation, humanity is one. God lives everywhere. The permanent residential home of God is our own heart. All traditions, all religions, all paths are so many different means to reach this ultimate destination, God. When you become spiritually enlightened, you look upon the whole humanity, the whole creation in fact, not only human beings or the members of the animal kingdom, the whole creation. You look upon the whole creation as an expression of the omnipresent divine reality. When you are in a church or a temple, you pray. When you come out of the church or a temple or any place of worship, you feel the presence of the same divine reality in everything. So you learn to look upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. You cannot pray to God and hate even an insect or a mosquito, leave alone human being. So when we become spiritual, we become more broad-minded. We become more spiritual, we become more humane, we begin to love everyone. It becomes physically and psychologically impossible for us to hate, to hurt anyone, because we realize that by hating or hurting anybody, we are hating ourselves, we are hurting ourselves. The whole creation becomes one spiritual reality, one spiritual family. There is no otherness. Swamiji expounded this idea with the help of, or in the context of, two famous verses which I am going to quote before you. One is from Shiva Mahimna Stotram. It was written by a great poet, his name is Pushpadanta. I will recite this, then I will translate. Trayi Sankhim Yoga Pashubadi Vaishnavidi Prapinne Prasthane Paramidamada Patimidicha Ruchinam Vaichitriyat Richu Kudila Nana Padajusham Nirnameko Gammistumasi Vaisam Arnava Iva. So this is the verse. It means this. Trayi Sankhim Yoga Pashupati Mata. No, these are different. These are different parts, different denominations of ancient Vedic tradition. Just like as today we call Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, and so on. Like that in ancient times, in Indian context, Indian subcontinent, these were different denominations. So in modern times we can see all different world religions, we can see, in the same context, in the same sense. So what are they? So these are all different means, different parts. Just like different rivers empty their waters to the same ocean. When they merge with the ocean, they lose their individual identity. They become one. Similarly, all different traditions, and not only religions, even if you can become a good human being without believing in a creator God, you can become spiritual. There's an important radical idea that Vivekananda brought to modern world. It comes from, of course, Advaita philosophy, non-dualism. So there can be any number of means, any number of parts, any number of philosophical systems. All of them are equally varied parts leading to the same goal. Another verse that Swami Vivekananda referred to, he doesn't quote. Ye yathamam prabadyante tam tadaiva bhajameham mama varma anuvartanti manushyaha partha sarvasya. It comes in the Gita. Gita is one verse. Of course, Gita is one fraction of a much bigger work. The bigger work is Mahabharata, which is, in its shortest version, more than 100,000 verses. Gita is a small fraction of this huge work with 700 verses. So this Gita, Bhagavad Gita says, whatever may be the path, if a spiritual seeker is sincere, pure, unselfish, then he is taking my path, whatever may be the path. And one important aspect of this spiritual paradigm is, it doesn't divide humanity into believers and non-believers, into theists and agnostics and atheists. God opens his doors and windows, even in front of the atheists or agnostics. Swami Vivekananda makes a very radical statement in one of his lectures. You live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not believe in Him. So one can be spiritual without being religious. So this is a unique feature of Vedantic paradigm. If you see Buddha, for example, did not believe in a creator God, but is supposed to be one of the greatest spiritual masters, spiritual teachers the world has produced. So what Vivekananda brought to modern times was a new spiritual religious paradigm, which is kind of universal spiritual humanism. Humanism based on the idea that humanity is one spiritual family. So it is universal and it is spiritual. This was what Vivekananda brought to modern world. And now this was a modern interpretation of an ancient spiritual paradigm, which goes back to the Vedas. The first statement in Vedantic tradition comes from Rig Veda. I think I must speak a few words about Vivekananda because most of you are familiar, but there could be a few of you to whom Vivekananda's name may be new. So I shall speak a few words about Vivekananda, then I will come back to the subjects. Perhaps I should have done it earlier. Vivekananda was a great monk who was born in 1863 in India, in the province of Bengal, and passed away in 1902. He was born in 1863, January 12th, and passed away in 1902, July 4th. His teacher was Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was a great spiritual mystic, a highly elevated spiritual teacher who was born in 1836 and passed away in 1886. Now coming back to Vivekananda. Vivekananda's philosophy consists of three important elements. One is Eastern and Western education. He was highly educated in the modern sense of the term. He had his education in Metropolitan School, in the Scottish Church College, which was run by the Church of England, the Anglican Church, and also the Calcutta Presidency College. As you remember, he was born in the city of Calcutta in India. And so it was a time when people were slowly losing faith in religion and spiritual teachings. You'll be surprised to know, Vivekananda says, of course one of his biographers says, that during those days, students used to keep a copy of Origin of Species, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, and a small copy of Communist Manifesto, which they may read or not, but they would keep, and they were very proud of it. There is a fashion, in those days. Science and technology had not become so much important in educational career. So that was a time of skepticism, doubt, and kind of a tendency to reject everything that belongs to the ancient tradition. So he had the best of modern education. He was steeped in Spencer, Kant, Hegel, Leibniz, Nietzsche, and he even refers to utopian socialism, Fabian socialism, Marxian thought, and all that. Marxian thought had not become an ideology at that time. It was only a socio-economic political thought system during those days. It had nothing to do with politics, so to speak, in those days. You're talking about the 1880s, 1890s, mind you. That means Swami Vivekananda was going to college and university at that time. So he was well versed in modern education. And at the same time, he had a first-hand knowledge of many of the traditional Sanskrit scriptures, Vedantic scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, Upanishads, and so on. And again, he was a great humanist. Swamiji comes very heavily on some of the social injustices that he found prevalent in 19th century India. The neglect of the women folk, the downtrodden, the wide gap between the rich and poor, and then many of these social injustices, superstitions, were strongly criticized by Swami Vivekananda. He was a great humanist. He would travel all over India. So his love for his motherland and this Eastern and Western education, these were two important elements. The third important factor was the deep traditional spiritual training that he received under his spiritual teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was himself not a very, very well educated man in the conventional sense of the term, but he was spiritually an elevated soul. In fact, whatever you find in Vivekananda's teachings, his writings and lectures, all came from this traditional, old-fashioned, spiritual, mystic name called Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was born in a very backward village in Bengal, about 100 kilometers, about 60 miles away from Calcutta, who didn't receive any of the modern education, and who was a priest in a temple. And the great training that he received from Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was the most important element that determined, in fact, that formulated Vivekananda's philosophy. His spiritual humanism, his education philosophy, all came from his great teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. I will conclude my brief description of Swami Vivekananda's personality with one more episode which is very revealing. You know who introduced Vivekananda? Was an agnostic who went to Scottish Church College and Presidency College. Who introduced him to his teacher, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa? You'll be surprised. It was a British professor who was teaching English literature in the university, in the college, so Scottish Church College. His name was Professor Hastie, who was teaching William Wordsworth's Excursions, a mystical poem in which Wordsworth used the word trance. Now, people didn't know, many students asked questions. What do you mean by trance? Mystical ecstasy, experience. The professor could not give a full reply, a satisfactory reply. He said, well, if you really want to know what this means, this transcendental inner spiritual experience, what really means, go to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And who is he? He is a priest in a small temple in Dakshineshwar. You will find the real meaning of the word which Wordsworth used in the poem Excursion. This recommendation came from an Anglican professor of English literature. That's how Swami Vivekananda, at that time his name was Narendranath Datta, happened to go to Dakshineshwar and meet his great teacher, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So that much about the background. Now we'll come back to the subject. Now, what was the unique message that Swami Vivekananda gave to modern world in the context of interfaith conversation, interfaith relationship, and so on? Now, today you find you cannot really tell anyone that you're of my religion. I can't tell anyone, any educated, cultured person, I can't say my religion is the only true religion. They will laugh at me. At least in educational, in a university or a college, we won't take seriously if somebody tells us, well, my religion is the only religion. They're all wrong. You know the reason? The reason is, today humanity has traveled a long distance from the old exclusivism to a kind of dialogical approach, a culture of dialogue, a culture of interfaith conversation. We feel we have to learn from all other traditions to enrich our own understanding of what religion means. Now, this transition started in 1893, and for that, the world is indebted to the organizers of the Parliament of Religion, which is the first international interfaith conversation, interfaith dialogue that took place in the world. It is part of the 400th anniversary celebration of Columbus' discovery of the United States of America. It is a big program. For the first time in the history of world religions, the delegates representing different organized religions assembled on a single platform and exchanged ideas. On that platform, Vivekananda makes a very interesting remark. He says, religion has 4 levels of evolution. 1, rituals. Say Hindu goes to his temple, a Christian goes to a church, Buddhist goes to a Buddhist temple, and Jew goes to the synagogue, and so on. All of us read our own sacred scriptures. Now, if this is the beginning and the end of religion, there cannot be any harmony. Because at this level, each religion is different from each other religion. At the level of ceremonies and rituals and mythologies, there are differences. So we evolve from external rituals, from the gross forms of ceremonies, from mythology, we evolve to theology and philosophy. When we reach the level of philosophy, you find there are some common factors among different religious traditions. When I read Eckhart for the first time, Rodolfo, I had to edit a doctorate thesis on Eckhart, written by a Jesuit priest who is a friend of mine in India, where I'm coming from. And I was editor of a magazine for more than 14 years, 8 months. So I requested him to translate his thesis, which he wrote in German, because he was in Germany for 17 years as a student, as a teacher, the Jesuit priest. So I asked him to translate this into the vernacular form, the vernacular language in which I speak, which I was the editor of the magazine. And I went through and I found out that the Upanishads that I learned as a boy and even later on are reproduced in the Old German by Meister Eckhart. So you find, even at the higher philosophical level, there are many common factors. So from external rituals, ceremonies, mythologies, when we reach the level of higher religious philosophy, you find many of the great religious philosophers spoke and wrote about and expounded the same spiritual truth in different languages, with the help of different parables, using different imageries. But then there is a higher level, spiritual experience. At the level of experience, you find all religions contain the same fundamental universal truth. All problems of disharmony, misunderstanding, and conflicts are because we believe that rituals are the beginning and the end of religious traditions. So these are secondary details. Rituals, external practices and ceremonies are secondary details in the sense they are socio-cultural, anthropological aspects of a religious tradition. At the socio-anthropological level, each prophet is burdened with the cultural nuances, the cultural aspects of the tribe or the society in which he or she is born. So the language that the prophet uses may be the same of the tribe, of the society, social group among whom he is born. He has used the same language, same parables. But if, see, for example, take the Bible, the pastoral setting, the parables are all related to the cultural life, the social conventions of the people of Judah that age. But if you read the Sermon on the Mount, if you read the great parables of the Bible, Jesus, you find the same ideas you find in the higher spiritual literature called the Upanishads, which constitute the foundation of Vedanta philosophy, which Swami Vivekananda expounded in modern times. So when you go beyond the socio-anthropological aspects which constitute the secondary details of all religions, when you reach the level of inner experience, then you find there is a great transformation that takes place in our heart. There is a statement in the Rig Veda, Antaya Bahuvadinam Anantaya Mokam. Rig Veda is the most ancient and most important of Hindu Vedantic scripture. It means the language of experience is silence, because you cannot really explain how you felt the coffee you drank just now. We can write a thesis, but the best way to explain to your friend is you have a cup of coffee. Now, it's much more so when it comes to religious experience. So, one radical paradigm, contribution of Swami Vivekananda at modern times is, when you focus on the universal aspects of any religious tradition, that is experience, then we can find that all the great mystics speak of the same inner experience. That experience gives us inner joy, inner tranquility, serenity and peace within at the subjective level, and that inner experience expresses itself in the form of harmony, friendliness, broad-mindedness, and love and compassion in our interaction towards others. This was a unique contribution of Swami Vivekananda to modern times. So as I said earlier, it comes from the ancient Vedas. In the Atharva Veda, there is a famous statement. Atharva Veda is one of the four Vedas. You see, Yatha Nadyasyantamana Samudre Astam Gechandi Namarupe Vikaya Tatha Namarupa Vimuktaha Parat Param Purusham Upayadi Divyam. It's a famous statement. I shall explain in English. You think of various rivers. Suppose there are, say, 10 rivers which flow in the same direction and which merge with the same ocean. They merge, they join the same ocean. Once the water gets merged with the ocean, then their identities and differences vanish. They become one with the ocean. Similarly, all the differences at the level of external rituals, mythologies, even philosophical doctrines, dogmas and other aspects, they all vanish, they all dissolve when we reach this level of experience. One point that Vivekananda stressed again and again is religion becomes true religion when it becomes spirituality. Religion becomes spirituality when it goes beyond external rituals, belief systems and dogmas and reach the level of experience, because it is experience that transforms faith into spirituality. When we may have faith in something, but the same faith becomes an inner experience, the experience that we get in the kind of inner joy, spiritual contentment, inner joy and happiness, tranquility and peace that we experience within, when we are not at war with ourselves, when we are perfectly at peace with ourselves, then this experience expresses itself as harmony, as harmony and friendliness and broad-mindedness, compassion and mercy and kindness in our interaction with others. So there are two aspects of the same experience. One, we feel at peace within ourselves. Second, we feel at peace when we interact with others. This was a unique paradigm that Swami Vivekananda expressed. Now, he uses two terms in his lectures and writings to explain the same experience. At the subjective level, he calls it practical Vedanta. At the objective level, he uses an interesting term called universal religion. What is universal religion according to Vivekananda? As I said earlier, when you interpret a religion on the basis of the fundamental universal spiritual teachings of that particular book, leaving aside, not worrying much about the secondary details. What are the secondary details? The differences due to cultural, social aspects, different conventions and practices and external rituals which may vary from place to place, people to people. All these are minor differences. Beyond and behind these differences, diversities, there is an essential spiritual focus. What's the experience? If you focus on this experience, then it becomes universal religion. I mean, a religious ideal, a religious paradigm based upon the universal teachings of different religious traditions, which is the special characteristic of great spiritual teachers, because when we meditate upon God, we become godly. When we meditate upon God as a compassionate spiritual teacher, we also become more humane, we also become more divine. Then it becomes psychologically impossible for us to look upon anybody as the other. This is the universal religion. In its actual practical aspect, it becomes practical Vedanta. It means the best way, Vivekananda says, the best way to worship God is to serve our next door neighbor. Because the best temple is human heart. The Taj Mahal of temples, as he called. Man is the Taj Mahal of temples. Man means man is women, both human beings. It doesn't mean that you go and worship a human being. It means the same worshipful respect and honor and compassion and mercy, broad-mindedness that we show to the God idea, we must express towards our fellow human beings. Then this is the highest form of spiritual practice. I can quote one famous verse from a very famous, well-known Vedantic text called Mandukya Karika. It's a famous, it says, So Siddhanta Vivasthasu Dvaitino Nisidadadam Parasparam Viruddhinde Taihi Ayam Na Viruddhinde. This is a famous verse. The literal meaning is this. Then I shall try to explain to you in the light of interpretation given by Shankaracharya, whose picture you find in the flyer. Because it was Shankaracharya who first expounded this universal spiritual humanism as a compact metaphysical and spiritual system in 8th century. The vast Vedic literature was thoroughly analyzed, and he brought out this the essence of the entire Vedantic literature. The meaning of this verse is this: those who believe that God is, say, staying somewhere outside may fight among themselves, but those who believe that God lives within our heart, those who believe in the immanence of God principle, and those who believe in the omnipresence, those who believe that God is one omnipresent reality, all-pervading reality, they cannot quarrel with anybody, because just as you cannot fight with your own hands or your own head without hurting yourself, similarly, we cannot hate, hurt, or do any harm to anybody in the world if we look upon the whole creation, humanity, as an expression of the same spiritual reality whom we call God. This is not a belief. This is not just a belief. It is an experience, because belief only goes skin deep. Belief becomes spirituality when we go beyond the lower levels of external ceremonies, external practices, belief in mythological stories, belief in dogmas and doctrines. When we go beyond all this, when we reach the level of experience, then this becomes spirituality. All the great world religious teachers were blessed with this higher inner experience. That's why they could teach the great teachings that they gave to the world. So Vivekananda said, we must look beyond the external rituals, external practices, and focus on the spiritual experience at the final goal. While interpreting these great ideas, Swami Vivekananda was indirectly giving a new life to religion as a whole. You have to remember the time when Vivekananda came to the West. He started his preaching life in 1893 and he passed away in 1902. So just about 9 years. When Vivekananda appeared on the world scene, religion itself was facing a great challenge. Those of you who are familiar with the history of 19th century and those who are familiar with the philosophical, cultural and ideological landscape of the United States and Europe in 19th century may very well understand this. With the advent of Marx and Engels and with the advent of Charles Darwin, who wrote Origin of Species, many of the belief systems of organized religions were facing a great challenge. So many radical humanists had already started challenging the claims, the exclusive claims of religion, which always insisted on a transcendental moral authority, a creator God who created this world and divided humanity into conflicting groups of believers and non-believers, tempting the believers with paradise and threatening the non-believers with eternal damnation, so on. So this was the great challenge, criticism of organized religions, 19th century. You find echoes of this criticism in the 2 volumes written by Dr. Barrows, who wrote and published the 2 volumes, which contained the speeches of the great religious delegates who delivered lectures in Parliament of Religion. Many of the lectures echo the contemporary problems that religions were facing in 19th century, especially from 1850s and 40s till almost 2000, maybe the early decades of 20th century. So radical humanists, positivists, and evolutionists were challenging the right of religions to exist. Because if you look at the history of religions, so-called religions, you find a lot of bloodshed, a lot of violence, a lot of fight, a lot of war in the name of God and on behalf of religions. This is one thing. On the other hand, we talk about religion as a path leading to God, spiritual enlightenment. So why this conflict, this contradiction? If religion is a spiritual force that refines our heart, that gives us peace of mind, why should there be so many conflicts? This happened in all traditions, in all religious traditions. So Vivekananda was faced with this problem. And his answer is this: it's not religion that is at fault, that we are at fault. Instead of focusing on the universal spiritual teachings of the great teachers of the world, we focus on the secondary details, the conventions the traditions, the social do's and don'ts, the taboos, and so on. And often we sometimes interpret religions in tribalistic terms. So he said, we must go beyond, we must look beyond these apparent contradictions and conflicts and differences, which are secondary details. We must focus on the universal spiritual teachings. When we do that, we can find there are great truths, great gems of truth in all religious traditions. Then there can be peace and harmony. Now, if you look at the history of interfaith conversation, you find the first great interfaith dialogue took place maybe in the 3rd century BC, when Ashoka the Great organized a council of different religious traditions of those days in India, Buddhists, Jains, and different denominations of Indian or Hindu tradition. The second important effort, of course, I'm talking about Vedantic tradition. In the West, of course, you can, about the Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. That's the beginning of the division between Eastern and Roman, Western and Eastern Roman Church and so on. But before this, Ashoka the Great was the one who first organized the council. And then one emperor in India, his name was Akbar the Great, he tried to give shape to the universal religion by incorporating or borrowing teachings from Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, and so on. But it didn't take off because it was just a kind of elitism in borrowing things and putting together without integrity. The basis was not experience, but Vivekananda says that the foundation of interfaith harmony should be the fact that we must accept all religions as equally valid paths leading to the same goal, that is God realization or spiritual enlightenment. God realization needs some explanation. In Vedantic tradition, it means the realization of the fact that humanity is one. God lives within the hearts of all of us. And based on this, not belief but experience, looking upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. That's the subjective experience. At the objective level, in our interaction with others, it expresses as natural, harmonious relationship with everyone around us. Now, one unique contribution to Vivekananda is, he says, you can be spiritual without being religious. But one can remain religious without being spiritual. That is very dangerous. There's a very unique teaching that Swami Vivekananda gives. The religion can become a religiosity, and that's very dangerous. Religion should become spirituality. So he says religion is spirituality. Religion is the art of translating the reality of God's existence everywhere into every action, every word, every thought. And then the whole world becomes a symbol of the spiritual reality we call God. And every thought becomes an act of meditation. Every act becomes an act of worship. The whole life becomes spiritualized. The danger is we may secularize the spiritual. Our goal should be to spiritualize the secular, so that the line of demarcation between the secular and spiritual should vanish. Whole life should become spiritual. This is what he says. This is what he calls practical Vedanta. When we reach this level, then we'll be able to look upon all religions as equally valid paths leading to the same goal. It's not just tolerance, but rather acceptance of the other man's religion as equally noble, acceptable as ours. That's what. So, in fact, he emphasizes this point. It is not enough to be tolerant. You can be, well, you are wrong, I am right, but still I allow you to remain here. Complacency, sometimes it becomes also an expression of bigotry. So he says, we must go beyond tolerance. We must accept that the other person's religious tradition is as sacred, as valid as our own. When this happens, there will be perfect harmony and peace. So it is not confined to any particular religion. Another thing, it is not even confined to religion at all. In fact, the difference between the believers and non-believers vanishes if you read Vivekananda's teachings. He says you can be spiritual without being religious. You can be spiritual even without believing God. That's a very radical idea. In fact, it comes from Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism. Maybe non-dualism is one unique spiritual paradigm which teaches us that you can be spiritual even without believing God. If you lead a godly life, a spiritual life, you become spiritual. Maybe, of course, the classical example I already mentioned, Buddha is a classic example. Vardhamana Mahavira, the exponent of modern Jainism is another example. You find many great spiritual men and women who led pure life. They're spiritual, not necessarily religious in the conventional sense of the term. But if you interpret religion as spirituality, they're classic examples of religion in its purest form, which is nothing but spirituality. So now I think we will have interaction. Maybe that may be much more productive, much more helpful, informative. So you're free to ask. You need not spare me. You're free to ask any question that you want. I shall try my best to answer.